And welcome back to NASCAR Race Hub, presented by Hooters. Now, tomorrow and Wednesday, we will have the Charlotte test fully covered right here on the Hub. And right now, we've got Brian Vickers. Let's talk a little bit about testing and what you think about the transition back to the spoiler.
I think it's a good transition. I think it's the right move, the right direction. I think there's a lot of thoughts behind it. You know, first and foremost, competition. You know, they want something a little more racy in traffic, something that doesn't, you know, the wing is actually an extremely efficient creator of downforce in clean air. In turbulent air is where it really struggles. You know, in a big pack of cars around a lot of traffic is where it struggles the most. And the spoiler actually, surprisingly, creates as much, if not more, downforce in a lot of situations, especially in traffic. And that's really what they're going after. I think it's definitely in the right direction. You know, is it going to be night and day? You know, probably not. But will you see a difference? Absolutely.
Yesterday, after the race, Kurt Busch had dominated. He was so upset, not because he didn't win, but because Jimmy Johnson was the driver that was celebrating in victory lane. You're friends with Jimmy. You spent a great deal of time at Hendrick Motorsports, have a great relationship with that organization. What do you make of what Jimmy is doing now, and is he good for the sport?
I think he's great for the sport. I get a little disappointed in how he's treated and how people react to him, because we're the only sport where if you're that good and you dominate as a team, and it's not just Jimmy, it's that whole team, sure. You're almost condemned for it. And, right. You know, name another sport where, I mean, when Tiger Woods, you know, dominates a season or a golf match, you know, he's celebrated for it. 10, 15 years from now, you're going to look back and say, man, that was awesome to get to see that guy race. I hope one day they're going to say the same thing about me. But right now, you know, you can't argue that Jimmy's the man. And if you look back at our sports history, anybody would have given their left arm to have an opportunity to be there at some of those races where Richard Petty won. Right. You know, but I'm curious to know, what were they saying in the moment? Were they reacting the same to Richard Petty as they're reacting to Jimmy? The next stop on the schedule is Martinsville. And when we look at your numbers at the paperclip, they're not glowing. 1 top 10 and 10 starts there and an average finish of 21st. So based on what you just said, every race being equal and knowing your history at Martinsville is not great, how do you manage the race this weekend? It's a race that we know is not one of our best. You know, it's not like we're going into Michigan. You know, it's one of our better racetracks. But it doesn't mean we can't make it one of our better racetracks. I think Jimmy's a great example of that. Bristol was one of his worst racetracks on the circuit. I mean, they really struggled there. And they just really focused and focused and focused on getting better there. And, you know, they ended up winning the race. And I feel like, you know, the Red Bull 83 team can do the same. It certainly has been fun to watch you and this organization grow, making the chase a year ago, knocking on the door again here in 2010. Congratulations on that, and thanks for being with us in the Hub. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. And you know what? Practice makes perfect. So earlier we let Brian get behind the wheel of our iRacing simulator to take some laps at Martinsville. More Hub coming up. And what really makes Martinsville unique and what makes it so hard with brakes is because of how much horsepower you have, how fast you are traveling at the end of the straightaway, 120 so miles an hour. And then you have to get all the way down to 50 in the corner, 50 or 60, I don't know exactly what it is. And that's where the brakes come in. You know, our cars not only don't have carbon brakes like you'll see on open wheel cars, they have steel brakes, but they're also 3,500 pounds. It's a lot of mass. It's a lot of mass to slow down to get stopped for the center of the corner. So you'll really, really, really be hard on brakes here because of that, because you have no banking, because the car is so heavy, and you have to slow it down so much, basically twice a lap.
Now it's time for the big one, presented by Hooters. With his win in Bristol, Johnson became the 4th quickest driver in Sprint Cup history to make it to the 50-win plateau. Only the Silver Fox, DW, and Jimmy's teammate Jeff Gordon took less starts to get there. Well, welcome back to the Hub, and welcome to the Hub, Championship Crew Chief Jeff Hammond. Thanks for coming.
I appreciate it, guys.
Now, again, we see the 48 team in victory lane. How did it get there this time?
Well, surprise, surprise. Anything can happen at Bristol, but it has to be the last restart. I mean, they both had solid pit stops. We're talking about Kurt Busch, who dominated the day, but that last pit stops, both crew chiefs, they opted for 4 tires. But on that restart, the outside line went. Jimmy was able to get a great jump, take advantage of those 4 tires. Unfortunately for Kurt Busch, he got mired back, I think, in traffic with the guys who took 2 tires, and it cost him an opportunity. And the thing about Jimmy's car, It was so good on the short runs. And the way things played in, it was a short run opportunity. He took full advantage of it.
The one word that comes to mind for me when it comes to Jimmie Johnson is respect, and everyone seems to have it for driver 48, and not just the guys he's racing with week in and week out. I'm talking about some of the great veterans and legends of this sport. Recently, Junior Johnson made these comments about Jimmie Johnson. He's a great race car driver, and he's putting down incredible records, and I think he'll go a lot further than where he's at right now. He also went on to say that I wouldn't right this day rate him with Richard Petty or Dale Earnhardt or David Pearson or some of those guys, but I'm sure if he keeps going, he'll be there. What he's doing is very impressive. And, Jeff, I got to tell you, it's hard for me to compare him to some of the greats that Junior mentioned. But if you're able to do that, where does he rate?
Well, let's first off say when Junior Johnson says something like that, he's almost like E.F. Hutton. You need to listen because he's saying something very important. He knew those drivers. He raced against them. But if you take Jimmie Johnson, I got a better idea. Let's make Jimmie Johnson. If you took Junior Johnson, Richard Petty, David Pearson, Earnhardt, Darrell Waltrip, melted them all into a pot and poured it out, you'd get Jimmie Johnson. That's what I think. I think this guy is that good. He has a little bit of everybody. He's studied the history. He's seen what the greats have done, and he's turned right around and kind of like built his own career, I think, out of them.
Being that good, he has really frustrated the competition. And case in point, this Sunday, Kurt Busch led the most laps at Bristol, looked like he had the dominant car, but man, when he got out of that car, he was mad that he lost to Jimmie.
Well, that's a good thing, though, Rick. I mean, you want a driver to be passionate about winning as well as losing. If he's not frustrated, I don't have the right guy behind the wheel. And, yes, he should have been frustrated because he did have the best car all day long. He put on a classic display of how good he is at Bristol. But in the end, I think it was just kind of like the luck, the way it worked out. I think being caught down on the back of that deal, you see Steve Addington right there. He was just as frustrated, and I saw him after the race. They were hugging and trying. He was trying to console Kurt. And it's hard to make a driver feel good about losing a race when you know you had the best car and it's not in victory lane. But the passion of Jimmie Johnson came through, winning. We equally saw him frustrated. I think maybe this may be a good motivator, though, for the rest of the year for this number 2 team.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Kurt's old team, Roush Fenway. 3 drivers played the strategy game at the end of the race yesterday. It paid big dividends, and it also allowed them to make some gains in the points.
It really did. It kept, Matt Kenseth second in the points. He almost took it away from Kevin Harvick, 1 point behind him. But, Greg Biffle and he both have been so solid all year long. They've run all 5 races and finished in the top 10, which indicates to me that they've got a lot of things working like they need to. Todd Parrott, new crew chief for Matt Kenseth, I think that's paying dividends. It's just all looking solid. And you mentioned the third car, the 99 of Carl Edwards, after the disastrous results there at Atlanta, he bounces back, gets a solid finish, and moves him up to 13th in the points. So a great day for the Rouseketeers overall.
No doubt.
And we go to another short track, Martinsville coming up. It's always going to be fun, a little beating and banging. We appreciate your insight, and thanks for coming in.
I'm looking forward for a good truck race up there, too.
Should be a good one.
No doubt. The truck's on Saturday, Cup on Sunday. NASCAR's veterans in the Saturday night showdown at Bristol, saluting the crowd before the green. Harry Gant led the race in the early going, but Rick Wilson had the fastest car. He takes the top spot at lap 9. 5 to go, and his son Larry Pearson in the 21 spins going into turn 1 and is T-boned by Charlie Glotzbach. Pearson was knocked unconscious in the accident, but was awake and talking in the ambulance when he was taken to the hospital. He did suffer a compound fracture in his left ankle and a fractured pelvis, and also in his right hand. Glotzbach was able to climb out of his car, but was also taken to the hospital for precautionary reasons. When the race restarted, Phil Parsons taking the lead from Rick Wilson, but it wouldn't last long. Wilson, the strongest throughout the night, he would grab the top spot and go on to victory Saturday at Bristol.
That really brings back old memories. I just wish, the rest of them could have been there. Everybody could have been there at the end. But, I knew Phil he had a good race car. I knew he did. And, he'd lay back there like he used to and just kind of play around. But I knew when he got by me, it wasn't no big deal because I had a good enough race car to get back around him. I knew Phil was a good enough driver to give me room to get back by him.
NASCAR Race Up is presented by More Than a Mouthful Cheeseburger Monday at Hooters. Enjoy a Hooters More Than a Mouthful Cheeseburger platter with fries for only $5.99.